Today I'm going to tell you about 19-year-old Leila's story. On what should have been the happiest night of her life, her wedding night, everything changed in an instant. The beautiful white dress she had dreamed of wearing, the celebration that had been planned for months, all of it disappeared in a single moment. Imagine planning your perfect wedding day for months, only to have it turn into your worst nightmare. I know this might be difficult to hear, but imagine if this were your own daughter on her wedding night. Before we continue, please subscribe to our channel so we can keep sharing these important stories. What happened to Leila that night? And how did her life change forever? Stay with me to find out. 19-year-old Leila Mansour was the youngest daughter in a loving Palestinian family living in Gaza. She had long, dark hair that cascaded down her shoulders like silk, and eyes that sparkled with dreams of the future. For the past 8 months, she had been engaged to 24-year-old Ahmad, a kind young man who worked as a carpenter in the old city. Leila had been counting down the days to her wedding for what felt like forever. She was a gentle soul who loved reading poetry and tending to her mother's garden. Every morning, she would water the jasmine flowers that grew outside their stone house, dreaming of the day she would carry jasmine in her wedding bouquet. Ahmad was everything Leila had ever dreamed of in a husband. He was patient, kind, and had a wonderful sense of humor that could make her laugh even on her most difficult days. He had proposed to her under the old olive tree in her family's courtyard, the same tree where her parents had gotten engaged 25 years earlier. The engagement had been a beautiful celebration. The entire neighborhood had come together to congratulate the young couple. Leila's mother, Khalil, had prepared traditional sweets, and the women had sung traditional songs late into the night. Ahmad had promised Leila that their wedding would be even more beautiful, a celebration that the whole community would remember forever. For months, Leila and her mother had been preparing for the wedding. They had visited the fabric market 3 times to find the perfect material for her dress. Leila had chosen a beautiful white silk with delicate silver embroidery, the kind her grandmother had worn at her own wedding 60 years ago. Every evening after finishing her work as a seamstress, Leila would sit with her mother and sisters, hand-stitching beads onto her wedding dress. Each tiny bead was sewn with love, with hopes, with dreams of the future. Her older sister Miriam would often joke, "Leila, you're putting so much love into this dress, it's going to be magical." If this story is touching your heart so far, please give it a like. Can you imagine if this were your own daughter preparing for her wedding with such joy and hope? Let's continue. The wedding preparations had brought the whole family together. Leila's father, Abu Khalil, had been saving money for 2 years to make sure his youngest daughter had the wedding she deserved. He had hired the best musicians in the neighborhood and ordered enough food to feed 300 guests. Leila's aunts had come from neighboring villages to help with the preparations. They spent weeks preparing traditional dishes, making maamul cookies, stuffing grape leaves, and preparing the special wedding rice that had been passed down through generations. The house was filled with the sounds of women cooking, laughing, and sharing stories. Just 3 days before the wedding, Leila had her henna night. All the women in the family and neighborhood gathered in their courtyard. They painted intricate designs on Leila's hands and feet while singing traditional wedding songs. Leila felt like a princess, surrounded by the love of all the women who had watched her grow up. Her grandmother, Tata Fatima, had given her a special gift that night, a gold necklace that had been in their family for 4 generations. "This necklace has brought happiness to every bride in our family," she said, placing it around Leila's neck. "Now it will bring happiness to you too." The night before the wedding, Leila could barely sleep. She lay in bed thinking about Ahmad, about their future together, about the children they would have, about growing old together in the same neighborhood where they had fallen in love. She imagined herself cooking for him in their little apartment, tending to their own garden, maybe even having a daughter who would love jasmine flowers just like she did. Finally, the wedding day arrived. October 20th was a beautiful, clear day. The sun was shining, and there wasn't a cloud in the sky. Leila woke up before dawn, too excited to sleep any longer. Today was the day she had been dreaming about since she was a little girl. Her sisters and cousins arrived early to help her get ready. They spent hours doing her hair, weaving small jasmine flowers throughout her dark curls, just as she had always imagined. Her makeup was done by her cousin Nadia, who had learned the art from watching YouTube videos and practicing on all the neighborhood girls. When it was time to put on the dress, all the women in the family gathered around. Leila's mother had tears in her eyes as she helped her daughter step into the beautiful white gown they had worked on together for so many months. The dress fit perfectly, as if it had been made by angels. As Leila looked at herself in the mirror, she felt like she was in a fairy tale. The girl looking back at her was a woman, a bride, ready to start her new life. Her mother whispered in her ear, "You look just like I did on my wedding day. You are the most beautiful bride in all of Gaza." The celebration was supposed to begin at 7 o'clock in the evening. The men had set up a large tent in the courtyard, decorated with white and pink flowers. Long tables were arranged with the finest dishes the family could afford. The musicians had arrived early and were tuning their instruments, preparing to play the traditional songs that would celebrate Leila and Ahmad's union. Ahmad had spent the day with his own family and friends, preparing for the evening. According to tradition, he would arrive with a procession of drummers and singers to formally ask for his bride. Leila was waiting in her family's house, her heart beating with excitement and nervousness. At exactly 6:30 in the evening, Leila heard the sounds of celebration approaching. The drummers were getting closer, the women were beginning to sing. Ahmad was coming for her. This was the moment she had dreamed of for so long. But at 6:45 in the evening, just 15 minutes before the ceremony was supposed to begin, everything changed forever. Leila was sitting in her room, having her final touches applied to her makeup, when she heard a sound that made her blood run cold. It wasn't the sound of celebration, it wasn't the sound of music or laughter. It was a sound that every person in Gaza knew too well, but never wanted to hear. The sound of planes overhead. At first, everyone tried to ignore it. "Maybe they'll pass over," Leila's mother said, trying to keep her voice steady. "The wedding will continue." But the sound was getting closer. And closer. At 6:52 in the evening, just 8 minutes before Ahmad was supposed to arrive, the first explosion shook the ground. Leila, still in her beautiful white wedding dress, felt the house tremble around her. The mirror in front of her cracked down the middle, splitting her reflection in two. The jasmine flowers in her hair began to fall to the floor one by one. "Everyone to the basement," her father shouted. But there was no basement in their small stone house. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to run, nowhere to keep his daughter safe on what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. The second explosion was closer. Much closer. The windows of the house shattered, and glass scattered across the floor like deadly confetti. Leila's beautiful white dress was suddenly covered in dust and broken glass. Her mother grabbed her hand. "We have to leave. Now," she cried. But where could they go? The celebration tent in the courtyard was full of 300 guests, family members, friends, neighbors who had come to celebrate love and joy. Now they were all running, screaming, searching for safety that didn't exist. Leila stumbled out of the house in her wedding dress, her white shoes crunching on broken glass. The beautiful decorations they had spent weeks preparing were scattered everywhere. The tables full of food had been overturned. The musicians had abandoned their instruments and were running for their lives. And then she saw Ahmad. He was running toward her house, still wearing his wedding suit, his face desperate with worry. When he saw Leila in her torn and dusty wedding dress, he ran to her and wrapped her in his arms. "We have to get out of here," he shouted over the noise. Hand in hand, the bride and groom ran through the streets they had walked so many times before, but now everything was different. The neighborhood that had been decorated for their celebration was now filled with smoke and debris. They ran to the school building, where people were taking shelter. Leila's wedding dress was no longer white, it was gray with dust and torn at the edges. The jasmine flowers had all fallen from her hair. The golden necklace her grandmother had given her was still around her neck, but everything else from her perfect day was gone. In that crowded shelter, surrounded by crying children and worried parents, Leila and Ahmad sat together on the floor. Her beautiful wedding dress spread around them like a broken dream. Ahmad took her hand and looked into her eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry this happened on our wedding day." But Leila, with tears streaming down her face, looked back at him and said something that showed the strength that lived inside her 19-year-old heart: "We're together. That's all that matters. The dress, the party, the decorations, those are just things. But you and I, we're still here. We're still getting married." And so, in that shelter, surrounded by their frightened families and neighbors, with the sound of destruction outside, Leila and Ahmad were married. Not by a judge or an imam, but by their love, by their commitment to each other, by their refusal to let fear destroy their dreams. An elderly man in the shelter, who had once been a religious leader, spoke the traditional wedding words. The women who were there began to sing softly, the same songs they had planned to sing in the courtyard. Someone had managed to save a handful of rice, which they threw over the couple's heads. It wasn't the wedding Leila had planned for 8 months. There were no decorations, no feast, no dancing until dawn. But there was love. There was hope. There was a community that refused to let the young couple's happiness be completely destroyed. 3 days later, when it was safe to return to their neighborhood, Leila and Ahmad went back to see what remained of their celebration. The tent was gone, the decorations were scattered, the food had spoiled. But in the rubble, Leila found something precious, one of the jasmine flowers from her bouquet, somehow still intact, still beautiful. She pressed that flower in her wedding album, next to a photo someone had managed to take of her and Ahmad in the shelter, still in their wedding clothes, still holding hands, still believing in love despite everything they had lost. Today, Leila and Ahmad have been married for 6 months. They live in a small apartment, not the house they had dreamed of, but they're together. Leila still tends to jasmine flowers, now in small pots on their tiny balcony. And every night, Ahmad tells her that she was the most beautiful bride he had ever seen, not because of her dress or her decorations, but because of her courage, her strength, her refusal to let their love be destroyed. If you don't want young couples like Leila and Ahmad to have their most precious moments stolen from them, please like this video so their story can reach more people. Right now, thousands of people are watching this story. Let's make sure their voices are heard. Can you imagine if this were your own daughter on her wedding night? Can you imagine if your most beautiful dreams were shattered in an instant? Think about the last wedding you attended, the joy, the celebration, the hope for the future. What would it feel like to have all of that destroyed? Every like, every comment shows that couples like Leila and Ahmad are not forgotten. If you believe that every person deserves to celebrate love without fear, leave a Palestinian flag emoji in the comments. Subscribe to our channel to show that you stand with young people who refuse to let their dreams die. Tomorrow we'll bring you another story that will remind you of the power of human resilience. Don't miss it. Subscribe so we can continue sharing these important stories of courage and hope. Will you share a prayer for young couples like Leila and Ahmad in the comments? Their love survived, but so many others need our support. Show your reaction, let them know that their stories matter. Note, the names mentioned in this story have been changed for privacy purposes. This story is inspired by real events experienced by families during times of conflict.